Now, the customer challenge group model started in the water sector, but in one form or another, it's begun to be adopted or at least looked at in some other sectors. And in the insurance sector, they have independent governors committees. And here we have Robert Laslett, who was on the Zurich Independent Governors Committee, to explain how that works and in what way it's the same or different from customer challenge groups. Over to you, Robert.
Thank you.
Welcome to Robert, please.
I woke up this morning to listen to the Today programme to a controlled explosion in a school in Shropshire. And that may not seem very relevant to the IGC model, but it seemed to me that it was a paradigm of pensions, that they're dull most of the time, but if you don't store them in the right conditions, they're potentially explosive. That the mis-selling scandals, the policy instability in the area, the consumer weakness that was noted by the OFT in its report that led to the setting up of the independent governance committees were all features that led to a potentially explosive situation. Independent governance committee is kind of the new kid on the block in terms of consumer representation inside the company. They were set up about 18 months ago. They're mandated by the regulator. They're established in the provider firm. And they're there to ensure that providers of DC workplace pensions are giving their members value for money. And we'll come back to what that value for money means quite a bit later on. We're a group of experts, as Anna said. We're not a set of consumer representatives. I note that just yesterday, one of our fellow insurance companies, Royal London, did appoint a consumer member for the first time to its IGC, so maybe that is itself in flux. I've got some slides. I'm not going to use them. You've probably seen enough on the screen. A couple that just outline the strengths and weaknesses, or how the strengths and weaknesses noted in Zoe's paper apply to the IGC model, and a couple more that go into how the IGC model, in my view, performs against the strengths and weaknesses noted for the other types of consumer representation that we've heard about this morning. So instead of doing that, I'm going to start with the proposition, the economist's proposition, that what really matters for consumers in financial services is information asymmetry. And so all of these are just attempts to attack information asymmetry one way or another. IGCs are just a new manifestation of that. And they need three things to do it effectively, and I'll use the IGC letters to say what those might be. The I, with all due deference to Anna, they've got to be truly independent. The G, they've got to gather information, relevant information. And the C, they've got to be connected. So those are the three things I'm going to go through, starting with the I. Independence or lack of perceived independence can be both a strength and a limitation. But the basic question is, how can a body that's appointed and paid for by the provider be truly independent? In the Zurich Independent Governance Committee, we're all independent members in the sense that none of us worked for the company. We all have our independent reputations to consider, and many of us come from different sectors. Some of us are industry experts, and that's absolutely vital to know, if you like, where the bodies are buried. This is an industry with a very long history and a lot of background in terms of consumers not getting what they necessarily want or need. Others, like both Anne and myself, are on the Zurich IGC, are consumer experts with a good idea of what it is that consumers want or what might be good for them, even if they can't articulate what they want. We obviously have a formal responsibility to the FCA, but more than that, we need to show members that we are making a difference. And what we're trying to do in the Zurich IGC is come up with a model of, if you like, we said and you did, of logging the things that we've asked for from the insurance company and making sure that those things get delivered. Let's turn to gathering the information. For us, there are two key questions. Firstly, we clearly have to rely on the provider for some of the things that we absolutely need to know. Particularly management information can only come from that source. And how can we tell whether it's unbiased? And that's the main role, I think, or one of the key roles of our industry experts. As I say, they tell us where the bodies are buried, what might constitute good service, what constitutes relevant fund performance, or even what it is that constitutes a relevant measurement of price against which to assess value for money. And they also have to pay a lot of attention to what constitutes completeness of information, relevance of information, and conciseness. It's very easy, and we found this at the beginning of our relationship with a provider, to get buried in a mass of information that's coming through for management purposes, but which isn't actually all that relevant for what you need to do to represent a consumer and their interest. The second and even more burning question for us is how can you know whether workplace pensions are providing value for money when nobody can actually agree what value for money is? It's never been stated. There's no agreed rubric on this. So a lot of what we're doing in this fairly early and formative stage of the IGC work is research to try and find out what consumers think value for money is, what they think the price is that they're paying, for one thing. It's always been hidden from them. It's deducted from the product. It's not something they pay out of their own wallet. And finding a language to talk to them about what might constitute value for money. So that research is in 3 phases. Consumer deliberation, which we've been doing over the last few months, to try and find a language to use. Consumer education, trying to find some way that's sufficiently brief, but at the same time sufficiently informative to allow people to answer questions about, are you getting value from your workplace pension? And finally going into a piece of choice analysis, conjoint analysis, to try and find out how consumers would trade off between different attributes of the product they're getting. How much service, how good quality of fund management, how much advice or information about how much they should really be saving, and how they would trade that off against the price they're paying. There are many other things that are useful too, benchmarking, complaints data, and so forth, but I won't talk about these. I'll instead turn a little bit to the connection question. It's not so obvious from the slides, but it does seem to be increasingly important as the IGCs get going. They're looking increasingly to each other to see that they're keeping up to the pace, if you like. Part of that is formal. So the top 12 insurance companies have got together in a research syndicate to actually explore at an industry level the things that we in Zurich actually started off, exploring how value for money is perceived by consumers and how they think about it. We also look at each other's annual reports and best practice, and I think that's an enriching exercise. It also, of course, carries the danger of groupthink, and that's one of the, I think, bugbears of this whole model, which I'll come back to. We also look to what's happening in other industries, and it's no accident that there are people on IGCs who are, like myself, on other consumer panels. I'm on the Civil Aviation Consumer Panel. We've got the link with water through ANA, and I'm sure on other IGCs there are similar linkages being made. But as I say, this connection can lapse into groupthink unless powerful voices keep on shouting. And I think the effectiveness of IGCs as a whole is remarkably dependent on a very small number of people really speaking out loudly about what they care about, people with strong reputations and strong views. And so around the syndicate research table, it really comes down to 2 or 3 people saying what they believe, what they think is good for the consumer, and how that can best be taken forward. And if it weren't for all of those personalities being in the room, I think that exercise would quickly become stultified. So I'm learning myself in the process of the establishment of the IGCs, and I'm learning today from hearing about the other models that exist across other industries. And I'm very grateful for that, and I'll look forward to your questions and discussion. Thank you.